And I think that purely terrifies them. So who knows how long this video is going to last on YouTube.
It's September 2025. Now this video is inspired by very recent events, and I tend not to discuss specifically events like what I'm about to talk about, or directly talk about current events overall, say for example political or anything. But this event has to do with a gentleman that was known as Charlie Kirk and his assassination, and my condolences to his family and friends and everyone impacted by this, and his supporters even. Now I'm just gonna segue for a brief moment. Over the many years I've talked about what I would call online celebrities, better known today as influencers, and highlighting, for example, how their rise to fame, perhaps even fortune, has a lot of questions. And I've used, for example, offers that I had many years ago to do the same, which I refused. But that's not what this is about. A tragedy has taken place. Now, I am going to mention that there's a lot of people, perhaps even myself on some of these topics, that have a lot of questions about the event itself. I don't know if they think that the event was not real or if it was a setup. Take, for example, everything from how there appeared to be, this is what people are talking about, what they would call like a blood bag under the t-shirt, to how this dot had moved from the right shoulder to the left shoulder just a second prior to all this, to the hand gestures by the two individuals which appear to be his bodyguards behind him to his right, and these hand gestures being just like baseball hand gestures, and the lack of, for example, blood splatter behind him from the exit wound, and even to books being published the same day of the event, and online pages being created days before the event. I'm not addressing all these things, I'm simply highlighting some of the things that people have been talking about, because watching this, people might want to jump in and say, oh, did you hear about, yeah, of course. But that's not what this is about. I wasn't there, no one else was there. Perhaps some of these things might raise questions, sure. But people asking these questions were not there, and perhaps if someone was there and to say, hey, what's going on here, there would be an obvious answer. And there's enough information to say that it did happen. And apparently now they do have the person who did it, Tyler Robinson, I believe his name is. He is the son of a police officer, and in fact it was his father that had turned him in to the authorities after he confessed to him. It's a tragedy what happened, and throwing away 2 lives, because Charlie Kirk was only 31 years old, and the person who did this was, I believe, 22 years old. These people had their whole lives in front of them. But none of this is really going to be my focus, except to acknowledge that it's the foundation, the inspiration for what I would really like to talk about. And that is something I've talked about a lot, how this civilization, the human species, have devolved morally, for example, to the point now where there's a lot of people posting cheers, joy, all these things that this did happen, and even calling for more. And we see this, for example, as well on mainstream media and some alternative media. People are actually celebrating this, and this is what is most disturbing about all this. And that's why I wanted to highlight what we have, the perspective of some people challenging the event, its authenticity, to people cheering about it. This is just kind of putting it all together into the pot. Now, I've mentioned quite a bit lately a man by the name of Hughes, and him being a PSYOP expert. Chase Hughes puts out a lot of good information, especially in his area of expertise, but it doesn't state or imply that everything he says is accurate. I'm going to tie this all in together in a moment. Now, for example, in a recent video he did about this topic, he talks about how it's the people against the, I forget how he called it, the invisible elite, who are controlling everything, and how they're profiting no matter who wins or what happens in the world. Their agenda is moving forward, and they're getting more and more power. I've highlighted over the years, it's people versus the people. Regardless of how that has become, for example, through PSYOPs, social engineering, social conditioning, whatever you want to call it, but there's actually more to it than just that. I've talked about genetic hierarchy. A lot of people don't like to talk about that, because that right there proves that not everyone is equal. And no, not everyone is equal, whether it be within a group or groups relating to each other, for example. No one is equal. And there's quite a few people I'm noticing talking about how, using a common descriptive, there's no left or right of the aisle. There's no liberal Democrat or conservative Republican side. It's all an illusion, and that's not true either. Because we see, for example, how some people are drawn because, and I'm really going to simplify this, I'm going to be speaking in crayon once again, how some people are drawn genetically to certain ideologies and others to others. It's almost like when you talk about pineapple on pizza, yes or no. Some people's taste buds think that that's good, and some people's taste buds think that's bad. That's, you could say, more of a genetic thing. Yeah, there are going to be exceptions, whatever, but I'm trying to make a point here. There is a divide in the human species. And, for example, PSYOP, social engineering, social conditioning, whatever you want to call it, it will take hold on certain individuals, and certain flavors of Kool-Aid will be drank by certain types of people. There is a divide. It's real. I'm going to stop here for a moment to segue. From the political perspective, the left and right, there's no such thing. as some would say, the left wing and the right wing are still part of the same bird. So from that perspective, yeah, it's an illusion. It doesn't really exist. It's just a way to divide people. But the human species, that's something else. It always has been people versus the people. And when you have, for example, a certain group type within the human species becoming the majority, and for example, this group type, although they might say one thing, they practice something else. And for example, with what they do, some might even call it them being two-faced. They don't practice what they preach. And this is very real in today's world, and always has been. And at one time, for example, when another group type was more dominant, they had to remain more silent. But now, because of perceived equality efforts and all this other nonsense with political correctness, they have a voice and they become the majority. And it's a disease, a psychological disease, not in the sense that the liberal arts, theoretical pseudoscience of psychology talks about mental health issues as diseases, but it's like a pathogen. It will spread, preying on weak-minded people. And here we are today, where people can openly celebrate. You just have to think about how sick this is. Celebrate the murder, the assassination of an individual simply because they had open debates, and some people, from the looks of it, a lot of people, were triggered. Now, I've said over the years, here and there, how at the end of the day, everyone wants to have the same thing. They want to go to work, pay their bills, have food in their bellies, a roof over their heads, be with friends, family, enjoy life, and just live. And this applies to people all around the world, regardless of what country, what religion. None of this matters, because at the end of the day, the commoner just wants to live and, as a descriptive, be happy. This is what people have in common. But here's the thing, and this ties in with, for example, what I was talking about just moments ago, left and right type of thing. Everyone wants the same thing, but it all depends on what path people go on to achieve it. Moreover, is where do these paths actually, in reality, lead to? Because one path, from one group's perspective, may lead to more tyranny, while the other path, through, for example, discipline is freedom, will lead to happiness. So there's two things right there to consider when we're talking about the divide, people versus the people. And over the years, especially when it came to all these protests and marches and everything else, long before 2020, when I would say it's people versus the people, and people would be like ridiculing me, mocking me, and everything else. But now more and more people are starting to realize, yeah, there's truth to that. And that, in part, has to do with, again, as a descriptive, speaking in crayon, the genetic disposition that different people have for certain things. Talked about, going back to the genetic hierarchy, you have the alpha types, the beta types, and the omega types. And I've talked about different movements within different groups and the two different genders and everything else. These are all things that are signs. And we are, again, I'm going to say this, in the late stage of the last stage of civilization, the age of decadence. Again, and we repeat history because history is forgotten either by chance or design. And what always follows is our demise. And there's the patterns within, the 100-year patterns within. And I've shared fairly recently more in depth about this and the importance of knowing these patterns and cycles, because it helps you predict, with air quotes, what to anticipate, which helps one survive everything that's going on. And that's the only thing we can do right now, is survive. But when we see civilization, and I've shown, for example, in videos where people, I forget the title, something about salvaging the civilization again, why, part 2. And I just show examples of how society has devolved, and just showing all these different examples. And now we see where people are celebrating something horrific, not even considering what the family and friends of this individual are going through. It's disturbing. But there's no stopping those with generational commitment and the monopoly in violence. And I've hinted quite a bit in even some other videos off the topics I normally talk about, either hinted or more or less stated, that there's things beyond human that are playing this game out. Until people accept that, there's definitely no, as a descriptive, a common term used, there's no hope. But I just really want to again focus on this civilization and how bad we've become, and to make known about this assassination of Charlie Kirk. Whether you agree with him or not, with his debates, public debates, shouldn't matter. Words, phrases are not violence. Violence harms people and takes people from life. Again, that's something else that has been bastardized in the civilization. It's one of the same now, which is ridiculous. Anyway, this has gone a little bit longer than what I anticipated, and I thought I would just share. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.
I love you. Please, God, send this to somebody that you know. Take care.
Listen to this and write it down if you can't remember it. You're never going to outgrow warfare. You simply must learn to fight. I hear people saying to me, oh, when is it going to get easier? When you die.